Hi there. My strategy is project-based assessment. I will uh, intermittently use PBA or instead of project-based assessment or PBL, which stands for project-based learning, just so that it doesn't get too repetitive. Project-based assessment is basically a student-centered approach to learning over the course of an extended time period where students can ask their own questions and find their own answers. It's very hands-on. It's finding deeper knowledge through active exploration of real-world challenges or problems. Um, Very active and inquiry-based. So a lot of times with like scientific subjects, this works very well, especially subjects where or questions, general ideas that are more um, easily to explore and doesn't just have one right answer. Um, I found a lot of my information from a journal article written by four members of the European Association for Research on Learning and Instruction. Um, the journal title is Effects of Problem-Based Learning, a Meta-Analysis from the Angle of Assessment. And I will most likely pronounce their names wrong, but their names are David Gibbles, Philip Doshi, Piet van den Bosch, and Mian Segers. Like I said, they're all from Belgium. A little bit difficult to pronounce. But that's where I got a lot of this information. They have a very great, thorough assessment of all these issues that we find with project-based assessment. It's not the easiest thing to navigate. It surely takes a lot of time, a lot of research for the teacher, but I think is a great way for students to find authentic instruction and deeper learning. My dog is here. Sorry. The history of project-based assessment starts as early as Confucius and Aristotle. They were early proponents of teaching by doing, so hands-on, not so much just sitting down and being told what is right and wrong, but figuring that out on your own. Also, Socrates modeled learning through inquiry. A very prevalent example of somebody that was a big supporter of this kind of learning is Maria Montessori, which we know Montessori through like Montessori schools now and stuff like that. Mostly just self-directed, hands-on, and collaborative. So students at an early age learning to be self-sufficient and stuff like that. It should be noted that problem-based and project-based are two different things. Project-based has more of a broader thing, so you could have like a, just have a unit on, growing a garden or like best ways to grow a garden in Wyoming climate or anything like that, where students could find different answers and go out different varying ways. Problem-based learning is more, you start with a problem, and students can go varying ways, but it's just a little bit, tighter. Project is just a little bit more broad and allows a little bit more leniency on those answers. PBL, as we know it today, originated in Canada in the 1950s and 60s, and it started off with higher education and collegiate learning. I think for a long time that was really how people thought it could only be used. It started with medical training, but has also been used in different domains like architecture, business administration, economics, engineering, geology, law, nursing, social work, and psychology. I can really see how in a science field this kind would work really well. Also, I think psychology or sociology or anything that's studying humans would work really well because humans are not cut and dry. There's a lot of variation there. One of the things that I liked so much about the journal that I got a lot of this information from, they referenced a lot of different studies for what constitutes project-based assessment and what characteristics you have to have for it to work out. One of the people that they drew from was E.F. Barrows. They had a journal called Problem-Based Learning, an Approach to Medical Education. So again, they're more focused on higher education medical training. Their characteristics that they had for PBL were 1, learning is student-centered, so pretty self-explanatory. 2, learning occurs in small student groups. You would obviously have your whole class doing the same project, but you would want your students to be in smaller groups within that project just so that they can have varying answers and it's a little bit easier to work within. It's a more collaborative, really, because it's just going to be tough to have 25 students or however many collaborating on this all together. Number 3, a tutor is present as a facilitator or guide. So this would be, a teacher or, a tutor, whatever. Really as much help as you can get, I would assume would be helpful in this kind of scenario, but, just a teacher would work. Number 4, authentic problems are presented at the beginning of the learning sequence before any preparation or study has occurred. So I kind of read this as just being like a really solid introductory set and making sure that you have enough information to explain to the students the whole situation and to kind of get their gears grinding, figuring out what they might want to, pursue in this subject. Number 5, the problems encountered are used as tools to achieve the required knowledge and the problem-solving skills necessary to eventually solve the problem. So I kind of see this as a growth mindset and making sure that throughout this unit, say you're doing a whole semester, there's going to be times where they're going to find problems that they probably won't be able to, solve right away, and having the students navigate that and not necessarily having coming across a problem isn't going to stop them from pursuing the final answer or their final suggestion. The last characteristic, number 6, new information is acquired through self-directed learning. So again, this is pretty self-explanatory. You want the students to be doing the work on their own, and they will be motivated through, if they have an interest in what they're doing and they get to choose what they're doing. As far as the assessment goes with project-based, you can use traditional methods as well as more contemporary methods. I think one would want to steer clear of traditional methods like essays or multiple choice, just because we have discussed how multiple choice isn't necessarily the best way to figure out a student's deeper learning. It could just be luck or no luck, or crossing out answers that they know aren't true, and stuff like that. So not a very good way to really see how the students are thinking and not what they're thinking. An essays would work fine, I think. I would caution against having all students write an essay for everything. You obviously will have students that don't excel very well in, written words, stuff like that. Also, I think oral assessment works better for some of this stuff because students might not have the right language, or they might not know how quite to explain this, and I think person-to-person interaction, you would be able to get a better gauge of what they understand than if they were to write it down. The contemporary or new assessments, self and peer assessment, so just making sure that the students are holding each other accountable, especially in their groups. Having meetings with the teacher, maybe you have like one day each week where you pull aside a group and have them explain to you the progress that they've made and line out, this is the research that we have, this is our plans for what we're going to do. Having the students, I've had classes where, like, if we work together in a group, the teacher will have us grade our entire thing and then also grade each other in the group, and that's obviously like anonymous and not shared with the other students. That's a good way of holding the students accountable, and also grading themselves. Just, if you're making it clear what your expectations are and like what it means to be a good group member, what it means to be a good mediator, other things within a group. Portfolios or like final performances, not necessarily performances, but presentations. I feel that any project or problem-based project should have a final presentation that can look in many different ways. I'll go into that in a second here. Portfolio would be nice, just for one, keeping track. If you kept the portfolio in the classroom, the teacher could then check up on the progress and see how it's going. Also, at the end, it would be a good tool for students to really see all the different parts of their project and be able to put it all together easily. I feel that if you're going down a project-based assessment line, your students should be able to defend their findings successfully, and that doesn't necessarily mean that their findings should be successful. It's okay to have wrong answers, and if you're going to go a route like this, you probably will have a lot of wrong answers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong in how they've done it. It just, sometimes things have the wrong answers. So finding a way to let your students, ideally your students would be passionate about what they've found and what they're excited about what they've found and all the work that they've put into something if they're interested in it. So they should be able to defend their position or their findings and not just, say, I guess this is the right answer, or, like Googling it for the exact right answer. I think you'd be able to tell if they hadn't done the work or not. A few questions that the journal that I looked into asked about the assessment for problem-based assessment. Are the students able to define and describe the central concepts of the domain studied? And do they understand the interrelationships among the concepts? So this is going to be much deeper learning, not just dates or names or, facts. It's not asking when a president died or how a covalent bond works or anything like that. It's going to require a lot more deeper thought and work than that kind of stuff, which I really admire, I think, in this kind of session, kind of. I think the pragmatic philosophy goes best. It's more about how education is about life and growth, real-world applications, and experiential learning. So really that hands-on stuff comes in handy here. As far as examples, for the health education course, I made a project-based. I guess this would be more of like a problem-based learning project rather than project-based learning, but could work either way. I would break students up into groups and give them each a location that they are stranded at, where they have to figure out how to survive in these different scenarios. So That would entail them, making a map of where they're at, figuring out how shelter is going to work, what kind of trees are around, or if there is trees, like what's the best way to build a shelter. How are they going to get food? Are they going to fish? Are they going to hunt? Are they going to have to rely on, hunt or gathering, stuff like that. All sorts of stuff, weather, everything about this. Throughout, if you were going to do like a semester, I would break it up into, weeks. Students don't necessarily have to do like the same part of it in each week, but just say you have a 2-week span to figure out one component of your survival tactics, whether that be, how you're going to find food or anything like that. This gives students a choice, so they're not, forced into having to do one thing. There will be, like roadblocks thrown into the middle of it, like maybe one of your team members has gotten bit by a snake and they can't walk anymore or something like that. The students would have to navigate that issue. Throughout it, as far as assessment goes, it would be a lot of just checking in with your students, a lot of exit passes, a lot of one-on-one, or not necessarily one-on-one, but group to teacher meetings to figure out where they're at, what they need to do, how they can do it. Portfolio would really be helpful in this, keeping track of all your different research stuff. And then having a final presentation. This could look like a lot of different things depending on how the group wanted to do it. If they wanted to build their shelter in class and show the class, they could do that and talk about their other stuff. They could talk about, if they're just like cut and dry, keynote presentation people, they could do that. If they are more oral, they could talk through the whole thing. There's lots of different variations that somebody could present this information. However, each presentation would be following the same rubric with the same, details, which would generally be, with this kind of scenario, I think they could be graded on, for one, if they would survive, but also how they researched, how they worked as a team, all these different stuff. Even if they don't survive, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were really bad working together. It could just be they had a really hard area to live in. So that's a general overview of project-based assessment. I really like the idea of it. I'd like to use it in my classrooms in the future, but I understand that it's also a lot of work and not necessarily something that's super accepted in schools right now, or yet, just because of how much work that is and how you can fit in the curriculum with that. So, yeah, thank you for watching.